This past March, we marked an entire year in the COVID-19 pandemic. An entire year without many of the things that make life feel normal. And a year without live music. Tours and festivals were delayed and canceled. And though there was the occasional show in a field or small performance on a patio, concerts as we knew them vanished across the country. Needless to say, it's been a strange time. Now 1 year in, things are beginning to look up. As vaccines make their way into the Kingston community, the conversation on live music is beginning to shift from can we have shows to when. This is Kingston Live, and today we're talking with local industry insiders to get an idea of what the future holds for live music in the Limestone City.
The audience in Kingston is incredibly supportive.
We're all sort of doing it together.
There's something in every artist that comes out of Kingston that feels like it's an outlier.
It is a strange and wild and wonderful place.
Welcome to Kingston Live. My name is Riley Jabor. Joining me as my co-host this week, it is Eilish Sullivan.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. I don't know why I said this week because this is a monthly podcast, but let's roll with that.
Well, it's okay. And I mean, at this point, I'm not sure why I'm asking how you're doing. Everybody knows how everybody's doing at this point.
I kind of feel like we're on an upswing in Kingston, both in actually, okay, I got to rephrase that. I feel like we're beginning maybe an upswing of goodness, because as of today, we're up to 35,000 people in our community have been vaccinated. But also because we were planning this podcast where we were looking forward to the world getting back to normal, I think we jinxed ourselves because we also just got up to like 19 new cases today, 69 active cases of COVID in our community. But we will get better. We will get back to normal. And that is what brings us to our guests on this edition of Kingston Live. I'm going to kind of go around, I guess, just to introduce you guys one by one, and you guys can expand on who you are. Some of you have, I think everyone here actually has already, this is your at least second appearance on Kingston Live. So starting first of KPP Concerts, it is Marc Garniss. Marc, how are you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Our pleasure. Chris Morris of Homegrown Live, also local musician, also Kingstonist. Hello, friend.
Hello. It's wonderful to see you. It's wonderful to hear you.
And last but not least, Jan McDonald of Downtown Kingston BIA. Jan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thanks. It's so great to be here.
So I guess like to kick this off, how's everyone been for the last year? It's been hard for anyone booking, attending, looking forward to shows. It has been a weird year to say the very least.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think it was March the 4th, we did our last show at the Mansion. And then I'm the director of the film festival, and we tried to run one of those last year as well. On March the 12th, we made it to, and then we had to shut that down as well. And we actually had a little segue into maybe Chris here. He was venue managing for our Bedouin Sound Class show that didn't quite happen. You would probably tell the story better than I would, Chris, because I know I've tried to tell it to a few people, but the manager having one hand on the trailer ready to load into the alehouse and then getting a call from like the management company or the record label saying like, no, turn around, coronavirus has hit Kingston, the show's off.
It was literally that close. Like they came in and looked around, and I was friends with those guys from when they went to Queens. We chatted for a few minutes and, sort of expressed our worries and the state of the world. And then they said, okay, well, let's go and grab our gear. So I went outside and they opened the van, and he had his other hand on the phone and closed the van shut and said, all right, we're going home, and told the guys to check their phones for their flight plans. That was the end of it. I was on the phone with Marc, and I had to go to the manager of Alehouse and say, you got to tell all your staff not to come in because this show is canceled, and we don't know anything beyond that.
Yeah, that was sort of the nail in the coffin for the film festival. We had all our directors and special guests had canceled that morning and early afternoon, and we kind of saw the writing on the wall. And then, yeah, I think when Bedouin canceled, and we knew we were going to have to refund all those tickets, and it was just I think that was the Thursday, and we still had 3 festival days after that. So we're just like, no, this is not going to happen. Anyways, yeah. So that was a year ago. Here we are.
But you had an interesting thing too, where a lot of people didn't want their refunds, right? They let you sort of keep their money.
Yeah, I mean, that was awesome. After the festival ended, we weren't sure what we were going to do, because some people had seen a few movies, some people hadn't seen any. Some people were just going to the Bedouin Soundclash concert and, didn't have any interest in going into any of the films. So yeah, it was an outpouring of support for sure. I would say, maybe a quarter of people that bought tickets for the film festival last year that didn't end up attending anything donated their ticket money towards the festival. So that certainly helped us get through this year, which we just finished online only. And then we ended up showing all those music videos a little bit later. I think like 2-3 weeks later, we ended up showing them all online. So there was like some variation of that event actually did surface, but yeah, not Bedouin Soundclash.
I work with the Arrogant Worms and help them when they're out on tour, just from Kingston, and they were out on tour in BC, and they managed to get maybe halfway through their tour, and then had to fly home. But there was a lot of fans that felt really bad for them and decided to let the band keep the ticket money, which was a really, really, really sweet gesture.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of that's happened in the past year. There's been an opportunity to donate to the musicians or the organizers or the filmmakers. There has definitely been an outpouring of support for sure. And even like Wendy at the screening room, who's just like a regular kind of for-profit business downtown, but that means so much to the community. She I think she got like something like $100,000 in donations just to kind of keep her lights on, which is awesome. So yeah, we're seeing it everywhere, which is great.
I just wanted to jump in and kind of go over that emotion, because Riley and I were actually talking about this earlier in the week, just remembering a year ago and remembering that week of insanity, and the two of you thinking back to that insane moment with Bedouin Soundclash where you had to tell them to turn around. But I'm curious for you to describe, if you look back, how did you feel in that moment a year ago, and compare it to how you feel now and going forward into the future?
Yeah, I mean, when it happened, it was just, I felt like no precedent had really been set in Kingston. Maybe Jan would know what was going on maybe at the Leon Center and some other places, but I know we felt pretty isolated at the time, and like no precedent had really been set. Like we didn't feel like there was anybody, we didn't want to be the leaders on like shutting anything down. And I think Queens was still running. I feel like the hockey team, the Frontenacs, had maybe made some decision to, I'm not too sure. I'll let Jan maybe chime in there, but yeah, it was kind of nerve-wracking making a move like that. If like the Toronto Film Festival had canceled the week before or something like that, we would have said, okay, cool, well, we will follow suit gladly, But yeah, so I would say the big thing was it was just really nerve-wracking making that call, and ton of emotions in the year since. But yeah, now whereas now I feel like there is some hope and optimism, and it really does feel like things are returning. I'm not sure exactly. I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, but I'm not sure when things will be returning. But yeah, a year ago for sure, it just felt like you're sort of jumping into the abyss.
I was, I was working for Marc for that show and didn't have much of a dog in the race, so I didn't have to bother with all the refunds and all the complaints, people trying to figure out what was going on. But I had 2 gigs on St. Patrick's Day of my own, and a couple of minor shows that I was organizing that we squeezed in that last weekend. So I wasn't worried about such a big machine like the film festival. But, I definitely, as I started clearing out my calendar of gigs, I probably had at least 3 a week in March and April that, just kept every few days, just start clearing them out, and wondering how far into my summer I was going to go. So, that particular day of the Bedouin Soundclash show, and I felt an anxiety that I don't think I've ever felt before. I'm not really an anxious person, and it was, I didn't really know what to do with myself. And of course I've got kids and a granddaughter, and my wife was working in retail. So, we're just trying to figure out the future. But for the music side of it, I had no idea. The only thing I could compare it to at the time was 9/11. And, that didn't really have too much of an effect on Kingston. I mean, things were a little morose and subdued for a few days, but that was, I wasn't playing gigs in the States or anything, so it didn't really affect me that much.
So we at Downtown Kingston were really lucky in many ways, because March and April is normally when we're doing sort of the final touches on what's happening in our summer programming. And we had just finished FebFest, got through the whole month of FebFest, just got through assisting with the Briar, which is a miracle that event went off, that there were no cases resulted from that event. So we were really lucky with that. And I remember thinking at the time, my biggest disappointment was that I was going with one of my colleagues to the film festival, and I'm usually away the first weekend or first week in March after FebFest. And I was so disappointed, because for once I was actually going to be able to get to go to the film festival. But I was cautiously optimistic then. Like, I remember thinking to myself, it's okay. By the time we get around to the May long weekend, everything will be cleared up. We can run our summer events. I've paid deposits on blues performers for the Blues Festival. It's all going to be okay. Well, we all know what happened. We did end up working in partnership with the city and with Tourism Kingston to put on some musical performances in Market Square last year. And then just as things were ramping up, and I had a whole series of blues performers happening on Friday and Saturday nights in Market Square for September and October, we had to shut it down. We got one weekend in. I think it was 2 weekends in. And that was right when the alcohol policy went into place. So we were allowed to serve alcohol in Market Square. Like, all these miracle things were happening. A drink and a blues performer in Market Square. Who would have ever thought that could have happened? But then, of course, 2 weeks later, we were shut down. So then we were sort of back to the beginning again. What do we do? And again, we had that optimism coming into the new year with vaccines coming. I got mine this week. Yay. That, things were going to get back to normal. And now, it's just such a roller coaster of not knowing what's going to happen and what you can do. So we're, of course, at the mercy of, like everyone else is, the mercy of the health unit in the city as to what we can do. We're planning for music events July and August, but we don't even know if that's going to happen yet. So, there's so much uncertainty in the air. And I think that's the hardest part with all of this. Really is. And then, of course, we all have huge feelings for musicians and artists of all kinds who've suffered so much throughout this. It was really crazy. I was talking to a very good friend who lives in Australia, and they've done such an amazing job and been able to shut down. She went to the ballet last weekend with a full audience, and I felt the tears coming down my face. Like, it's been so long, and it just feels so wonderful that someone could do that. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but it's day by day.
And I was going to ask, in addition to the music venues, the loss of having live music with downtown Kingston, there's so many other businesses in downtown Kingston that maybe benefit from the foot traffic of people coming and going to shows downtown, to different things downtown. Have you noticed any impact on that you could see kind of as a direct result of the loss of our live music and arts stuff because of everything that's been going on this year?
Yeah, I certainly.
Have we checked on Bubba's?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think all of our businesses and restaurants would say that, everyone that goes to a grand performance often goes for dinner before. If you're going to the Leon Center for something, you walk by, you see something in a store window, you come back the next day, or you have dinner or dessert or drinks. So yeah, the impact is huge. It's enormous.
And I want to circle back to that point you made about drinks like alcohol in Market Square with live performers, because I find to take an optimistic approach to everything that's been going on for the last year. Things like some interesting new rules for things that were regularly very tightly regulated by the government. Is there any noise being made about keeping that rule going for downtown Kingston, trying to campaign to have that law made permanent to allow, I'm sure, like some of the downtown restaurants and bars that were serving food and drinks down there and having artists perform in that kind of distanced area outside in Market Square, that had to have a positive impact that could be translated to a post-pandemic world. Is there any thought of trying to make that a permanent fixture?
Yes.
I love it. Amazing.
Yes, it's certainly something that was popular. As a downtown business organization, we of course always want to encourage people to go into the restaurants and bars, but it proved for 2 weeks so successful that yes, it's being worked on for this summer and further forward. Yeah.
Amazing.
That gives me so much joy. Like, just the idea of that makes me so happy. And it kind of makes me want to expand on it as well for all three of you, because as much as there has been so much uncertainty in the last year, we've seen some really incredible things and some really incredible ideas, both from local venues, local restaurants and pubs, and also local artists. So if all of you could pick one favorite innovative idea that you've seen from this past year, what do you think it would be?
You're all on mute, by the way.
I admit, when the pandemic first hit, and I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible for anybody working in the music industry. But I think for the first couple of months, I just kind of put my head down. I was like, this is like a nice forced break. And I think, a year later, I'm like, okay, this is way too long. This is way too long of a forced break. But I think for maybe the first 2-3 months, I just kind of like removed myself from a scene I'd kind of been in for like 20 years. And like bands never stopped touring. I can't remember in the past 20 years, like bands didn't stop touring even for 9/11. I think, if you're on the road, you probably played a gig that night. It was weird. Like I think it was the first time we didn't have a show, and that would have been maybe after they all got canceled, like a few months later, because as Jan was saying, I think people thought things were going to come back a little bit quicker. So anyways, I didn't really answer your question there, Riley. I admitted to not really paying attention to what was going on for a few months. But then, since I've like now opened my eyes to some other things that are going on, I don't know. I just seeing bands writing and creating and knowing that a lot of bands are sitting on albums right now that they can't wait to get out, but are maybe holding back on them because they don't want to just release them to the world for free. They want to go out and play a show, right? Like, I mean, I think with the loss of it, that just goes to show how important live gigs are for musicians now, that they can't monetize their music in the same way, their recorded music, the same way that they would have maybe 20 years ago. Pearl Jam puts an album out and sells 5 million CDs. Maybe they still do that. I don't know. Maybe not CDs, but it's just bands definitely lean on the live component so much more now. So I think a lot of bands, some that I know locally and good friends of mine living all over, have albums up their sleeve that they're getting ready to release. So I think when things do come back, you're going to see a lot of really good music from bands that you like.
I can't really pinpoint off the top of my head one thing, but I think it's kind of just the overall resilience and creativity that people have been putting into live streaming and to still trying to get music out there. I mean, I think there's a lot of musicians that have just moved on to other things, but there's definitely I've seen a lot of pretty bad live streams of just dudes in their bedroom, and it's kind of boring, but my own gigs like that probably included. But trying to find ways to interact with your audience and to still try and get some revenue from a system that's not designed to give revenue. You know what I mean? So and it's as much from the musicians as from the music fans too. Like, I have people that have come to my Facebook live shows that say, I'll happily watch you for 2 hours. Normally I would spend $20 on a few glasses of wine at a show. So here's $20, that kind of thing. It's just really, really, really nice to see. Certainly don't make, what I would normally make for 2 hours, but I also don't have to lug at my gear and use any gas or do anything other than stand there and laugh at my own jokes and hope that someone else is laughing at them too.
And I guess for me and for us, one thing that I've found that's come out of this that's been really interesting and fun and exciting going forward is partnerships. So sort of working with other groups to make things happen. And the one that jumps to mind is we were talking one day with people at the boat lines. So typically the boat lines would have musicians on the boats. They'd go out, they'd play. Musicians weren't getting the same amount of work because the boat lines weren't going out at the same speed and they couldn't hire them. So what ended up out of that conversation was the series that we did on Sunday afternoons that was jazz. The performers were on the boat, but at the dock, and the audience was sitting in Confederation Park. So it ended up being something we never would have thought of and never did before, that people really enjoyed. And I think we'll continue with that in the future. So, and it worked with a socially distanced audience and all that sort of thing. So yeah, and also we've had great partnerships with Tourism Kingston and with the city and with Kingston Economic Development. And we've always worked together, but we haven't worked together quite as much. And I've really enjoyed that. It's been a good thing.
That can kind of lead into another question I had for you, Jan, and kind of broadly to everyone is when things start to roll back out for live shows in downtown Kingston and, nationwide, I assume there's going to be some level of hesitancy that people will have. I mean, we all experience it anytime you're going to the grocery store, the line's kind of long outside, you get that moment of like, should I just sort of hide out for a minute before heading in? Are there any considerations being made already as to how we can start to make people feel a little bit more comfortable venturing out, kind of venturing out of their shell in a weird way, to go back to venues, to go back to shows?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because we are at the mercy of what the health unit says we can do. I mean, I'm really hopeful. I'm a big fan of Dr. Moore, and when he says that most of Kingston's going to be vaccinated really soon, super enthusiastic about that. Of course, the concern is at our shows, outside shows, we deal with people from everywhere. It's not just people from Kingston. So how do you make that happen in a safe way? It's not easy. Does everybody who comes to an hour concert want to be asked all their information, that sort of thing? So we're working on how that will work. But again, we just have to wait and see what happens. I wish I had a quick answer and I could say everything will be safe, but none of us do.
Absolutely.
Maybe just more alcohol. I think some venues too that have some flexibility might be able to, like the Mansion's one that comes to mind for me just because we use their venue so much, but they have a great outdoor space. So I think there's going to be an interim, and hopefully it's this summer, where shows are happening again, but venues are obviously going to have to adapt. And places like the Mansion, and then even Musicky's got that little patio out back. I think outdoor venues are going to be hot this summer for sure. And then the living room at the Mansion, it might take a little bit longer for that room to kind of get back. But they got that volleyball court at the back. That could be a mosh pit too, right?
Kingston's most comfortable mosh pit.
That's
you got
right.
The padding with sand and everything.
Thank you for listening to Kingston Live. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. For more great Kingston music, check out the Kingston Live playlist on Spotify. You can also hear our sister show, Kingston Live on Air, on Amherst Island Radio 92.1 FM and CFRC 101.9 FM.
I definitely have a couple of questions just about kind of the experience with government funding, because for a lot of small businesses, the last year has been, well, we hate to say it, but a bit of a struggle in a lot of different ways. So how do you feel about, and this is kind of for all three of you, because of course you have the musician experience, you have the promoter experience, you have the BIA experience in there. So I'm just curious how you feel about the support from the government, whether it was provincial or federal. Do you think it was enough? Would you have rather seen more? How would you have rather seen it distributed? Just what are your ideas on it in general?
Well, I think and Jan, you probably saw this, maybe Chris, you did as well. Like just this past week, there was a ton of emergency funding just announced from the federal level. And it's great. And it gets you thinking of ideas of all these things that you want to do and how you can spend money on workers and artists and all these things. But the show needs to happen is the thing. So, if they're saying like we're encouraging promoters, or we're encouraging downtown business associations or musicians to go out and play these big gigs this summer for, whatever money you need. Those shows still need to happen, right? A lot of times they will say, if you can't do it, you can live stream it. But, then all of a sudden, if you're relying on maybe some like box office revenue, that's like we've chatted about earlier, it can be challenging to monetize the live stream side. But yeah, that's just one thing I noticed recently. I don't know if that's something that registered on your radar as well, Jan.
Yeah, I was actually going to defer to Chris on that because I know he's been involved with a lot of that with our downtown businesses. But it's been an interesting road to navigate because I'm impressed that there's been a lot out there and a lot available, but I'm worried that it's not getting to the people who actually need it, the artists and musicians, that sort of thing. And it's hard from our end because we're working with, individual businesses to try to help them navigate the system. So yeah, some of it's great, but some of it definitely has its challenges.
That's an interesting question because my day job with Kingston Economic Development, I actually deal with grants pretty much all day long. So working with all types of businesses, but definitely with bars and venues. Yeah, I've had several of them say to me specifically, like we're getting by on government grants and loans right now. So and so that's definitely keeping doors open for venues. On a more individual level, I mean, there's people in my band that have been that were full-time musicians. One guy that I play with, he had just left his bread and butter sort of day job, I think 3 or 4 months before the shutdown. So he was playing 5-6 gigs a week, and so he was living on CERB for quite a while. And he's not really sure exactly what the next few months look like. But I mean, I think in a general sense, the government has, on all levels, has done a reasonably good job of supporting people where they need it. Is there room for improvement? Are there gaps being left? Probably. Could things have been done faster or easier? I don't want to get political about it, but I think in a general sense, I think the government response has been pretty good.
Yeah, I've noticed a ton of funding out there for organizers. So for for KPP, if we have a project that we want to do, there seems like there's funding out there. In the film festival world, there's lots of funding out there for all kinds of things right now related to COVID. But I feel like the ones that do get a little bit lost are the artists. And I mean, I've played in a band myself, and when I was in that headspace, you don't really think of grants and the business side so much, right? Because you're out there, you're writing music. It's almost like two different parts of your brain. It's almost like you don't want to be the successful front man that's like writing a grant after a show, right? That's just not it's not the rock and roll lifestyle. So I think a lot of bands, they don't even know that side of the industry. And hopefully someone that have management companies and people helping them out are doing that on their behalf. But I think just the actual players, the actual musicians, a lot of that gets lost on them, and that's just not always in their skill set, and nor do they probably really want it to be. They're more concentrating on playing the show and writing the music. But
grant writing is not rock and roll is now my favorite quote from this entire episode.
Yeah, it's just like I think before I started working with the film festival, I barely knew what a grant. I'd heard of grants, but when I was playing in a band, I also played in a metal band, so it might be extra challenging to get a grant in that genre.
You did mention how grants have been super helpful anytime KPP has a project or an idea you're working with. And you did just announce your first show in a little while. You've got that Canadian Live Music Association Canaxus show with Oak Ridge Ave and Tiny Horse coming up. And it sounds like it's going to be a little bit different than your average kind of live stream that so many artists have been putting on lately. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be at the Isabel Vader Center, and yeah, it'll be streamed in real time. So, yeah, big, beautiful, giant venue that'll be completely empty, And it'll be free, and and co-promoted between KPP and the Isabel, and then Canaxis and the Canadian Live Music Association, the CLMA. Yeah, so I mean, their goal is to get these concerts in front of eyes kind of coast to coast. So hopefully for Oak Ridge and Tiny Horse, it's going to be, not just live streaming to Kingstonians, but to some people across the country. And that is the one nice thing with live streaming, is it's maybe even though it's not the preferred way to watch a band, it is such an easy point of entry into a show. Most times they're free, and then it's, you don't have to get off your couch, so you can check somebody out. It's like it really worked well for the film festival this year. Like, we had people from all over the place checking out the content that we were throwing online, just because it was so easy for them to attend this year. So yeah, hopefully a little bit of that feeds in for this show that we're doing with Oak Ridge and Tiny Horse, and they can make some new fans in different areas that wouldn't normally get to see them in Kingston.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things, like early in the pandemic, when everybody suddenly turned to live streaming at the same time, was you would open Facebook or Instagram or whichever social media app, and you would have that, everybody is live across the top, the stories live streaming section. And it kind of felt like a festival just in your pocket in a weird way. You would open it up and it's like, oh, I could pop into this venue, this stream, and see this band, or I could pop over here and see this band. And there was at least one or two nights where I was jumping around, virtual venue to virtual venue. And then I was like, oh, I have also not been virtually drinking. I've been really drinking, and it is getting spinny in here. I want to talk about the return of live music, because I've seen in some of the more like music hubs where artists plan on, hitting in the regular world, when they plan a tour, they have to hit, Toronto, Vancouver, whatever. I've seen some of them starting to book shows for later this year, which seems almost like, I'm cautiously optimistic, but it seems a little frightening to be like, oh, are we jinxing it by letting these things go this early? But I do know that when bands are planning tours for things like that, oftentimes they will look at markets like Kingston on their way between Toronto and Montreal. So have bands, you don't have to spoil anything you got up your sleeves, but have any bands started reaching out to Kingston for any kind of plans like that later this year?
The bigger bands that we have that would maybe fill the alehouse without any spoiler alerts, we have holds as early as late November, which I think, I don't know. I won't comment on anything, whether it's too soon or too late, because I really don't know. But yeah, as far as the industry goes, and booking agents who I think are probably, wanting to get their bands out on the road as soon as possible, but at the same time, not wanting to put a ton of work into a tour that's going to obviously get canceled. So the working sort of assumption or way it's operating right now is we do have holds for bands kind of the alehouse size, November and onward, and then a band maybe more like the Mansion size, bump that up a few months. I think we have a few holds in September. Having said that, I think music's going to come back way before that, probably through outdoor shows and different things over the summer. But yeah, as far as bands playing indoor venues, it looks like big shows, people have their fingers crossed for November.
I'm not booking as regularly as Marc is, but for Back to the Farm, we still have last year's lineup on ice, and I just was conducting the booking agents for our headliners a few days ago and finding out if they'd be willing to come back on our penciled in dates that we have set up we have one for August and one for September. The August is the unlikely optimistic date, and the September is the slightly more possible date that we have penciled in. So we have our headliners confirmed again for if we're able to put on a festival, and if we're able to do it at the size that we need to, be able to afford to pay them and all that kind of stuff.
So very locally speaking, not allowed to use the word event, because event obviously insinuates that people will come and gather. So if I use a different word like pop-up concerts that might happen at a regular time, if that's okay. So we will be working with the city again this year to use Market Square on a regular basis. I think Monday might be the day that you wouldn't want to go down if you wanted to hear some music. And if you wanted to go Friday, maybe it would be twice. And if you went Saturday, maybe it would be twice. But I can't say for sure.
You are dropping some amazing teases, Jan. I'm loving this.
But I would say that if you celebrated Canada and then after that came down to Market Square on a regular basis, you'd see some great local musicians, all being well.
I've been bugging Michelle and Jan at the BIA about possible street closures too. So we have a few other projects up our sleeve that we're hoping to launch this summer, and we've got funding in place for one already. So for hopefully a series where it could be free and outside, and we're hoping to do that in the summer for sure. So I think as soon as we kind of get the green light, and we're using that word pop-up too as well. I think we're hoping to do a couple pop-up concerts in some like weird areas downtown, and then hopefully some in more normal areas downtown as well. But yeah, I think we're going to see music come back this summer for sure. I'm just not quite sure what it's going to look like yet.
So there you have it here on Kingston Live. Officially, no events in Kingston. Pop-ups, yes. Events, apparently not. I want to ask a kind of cheesy question, but I feel like at this point, we almost need the cheesy questions in our lives right now. Do all of you feel that bands, musicians, performers, venues are stronger because of everything that we've been through in the past year? Because we've had a huge learning curve with everything from using social media effectively to continue earning money in some cases, getting your name out there, and just learning how to connect with people in a very different way. So do you feel that people are a bit stronger in the music and events community because of that?
I think in some ways, yes. Musicians and business owners in general, whether you own a music career or you own a music venue or you own a boutique or whatever, you're always a victim of time. So, in many respects, people have more time. So they're able to focus more on social media strategy and that kind of thing. Once they get back out, on the road or get back out to playing 3 nights a week in town or whatever, whether will they keep it up? Who knows? I mean, I know I've seen some musicians have definitely finally put effort into their websites, finally, focused on writing and focused on recording and that kind of thing. So, and I think venues too, again, back to my day job, helping venues with their digital marketing strategy. Some people are sort of seeing that, oh yeah, I can't get away without a website anymore. And I have to be able to, offer delivery through my website, and I have to, be available for people and communicate with them. So I think, looking at it now, the answer to your question is yes. But, when whatever normal returns, will it stay that way? I hope so. And I think so.
Yeah, humans are amazingly resilient. And it's my least favorite word throughout COVID, but pivoting is what a lot of people, including musicians and businesses and restaurants, have had to do. And some of them have done just amazing jobs. So I've been really impressed with how that's happened. Are people stronger because of it? I don't know. I think that's an individual thing. Some of us have certainly learned a lot, and it's probably made us stronger, but it's been harder on others. So, but I think we'll come through this with a lot more insight as to how we deal with difficult situations.
Building on what Jan said, stronger is an interesting term, because I think, in some ways, yes, but also, savings accounts are drained. So, if a venue goes through all this and then, there's a flood or there's a big electrical issue or something like that, they won't be able to just bully through like they might have been able to do. So definitely stronger in some ways, but, that cushion has definitely been eaten up by all this shutdown time.
I think a lot of people are going to want to support bands too as soon as they're able to. It's you know, a lot of bands aren't registered charities where you can go on their website and, you know, donate $100 or $200. You know, best you can do is maybe buy their album or something like that. So I think when bands get back out there and are playing shows, I think people are going to support, and I think business owners and bands, I feel like, I don't know, maybe places that wouldn't normally have had bands before might consider it now. I don't know. I feel like when the return finally comes, like the real return, most people have been vaccinated and there's no weirdness about going back out to bars. I know there's going to be a huge backlog of tours, and I think there's, like I mentioned earlier, I think there's going to be a backlog of albums ready to come out. Hopefully that material is good. So yeah, I think in those respects, things could be stronger. I think what we're going to see is a lot of really awesome co-headliner tours as well. Because, you know, for Kingston, we can only support so many live shows a week. So if Band A and Band B just happen to be going opposite ways on the 401, I think you're going to see maybe a little more leniency in bands, kind of get bands that maybe don't know each other. I'm talking about bands, you know, even from out of town, sharing a bill. Whereas in the past, that usually wouldn't happen. You know, it'd be like, well, I'm playing the Grad Club. Okay, well, I'm playing the Mansion, and they'll, you know, would compete on the same night. I have a feeling now bands will say like, okay, you know, let's charge an extra $5-10 to the door and play the same show. So I think audiences are going to be treated to a lot of shows, and a lot of like really good ones too.
I love what you said about places that maybe wouldn't normally have bands, booking bands and booking bands to play, because I feel like that's something we've really seen grow over this year in a creative way from everybody on screen right now. Like Marc, you've had live streams like we were just talking about in empty venues like the Isabel, and Chris, places like where Back to the Farm always goes down at the McKinnon Brothers Farm, playing anything can be a venue, you know, a back of a truck in a farmer's field, an empty venue that normally holds so many people, or a closed down street downtown. And I am absolutely ecstatic and giddy and thrilled to see bands going back to those places, and even stranger, creative, new spaces to see bands play once we finally get live music back into Kingston. And I feel like that's a decent spot to wrap, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that wasn't a question, was it?
I don't know. It was just a thing I said. Sometimes words just start falling out of my face, and I don't know where they're going.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say, like, for Homegrown Live, our model has always been like as many venues as possible with as many musicians as possible in it. And, you know, last March we were like, yeah, we'll still try it in May. Like, it doesn't, you know, we don't have big deposits or rent to pay on venues or anything like that. So, and then, you know, after about 2 weeks, I was like, okay, that was stupid. We'll try for the fall. And the fall came around. Okay, that's not going to work. And now we're looking at, you know, May is Homegrown month, and we can't do what we do, so we're gonna push it to the fall. But now we're looking at our venues, and we've already, you know, there's already 2 of our main venues have closed: the Royal Tavern and the Public House. So the Public House is reopening as something. So whether we can use that again, we don't know. Whether the Royal will reopen as something else, we don't know that either. So. But yeah, our model's always been cram as many people in as we're legally allowed to, and raise as much money as we can, and you know, 500 musicians playing on a day. So it might be a while before we can do that again, especially if restaurants are still at 50% capacity or whatever the rules are going to be. So that's going to be a tough one for sure. We should have this ready to go by the time this goes on the air. But when we looked at it last year, and you know, Riley was talking about, you know, seeing like 500 people on Facebook Live or whatever it is. We didn't really want to do that because so many of the Facebook Live shows are like, you know, everyone's doing their best with what they have for sure. But, you know, we just thought like, you know, a whole pile of bedroom concerts it just didn't feel like what we wanted to do. But we've seen a few local places do the live streaming thing really, really, really well. With multiple camera angles and, you know, actual sound processing and sound mixing and lights and that kind of thing. So we're going to try, you know, we just want to do our thing. Like, you know, Homegrown doesn't really have any major obligation to itself, other than, we want to support the music scene and support Joe's Mill. So we're going to try something with some live streaming and see if we can't at least get a little bit more music out there and give some musicians a bit more of an audience, and hopefully raise a few bucks for Joe's Mill in the process. And then we'll try the real thing again in the fall.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your evening to talk to us and getting me all fired up about shows that are going down, hopefully very soon. I am legit. I feel like a kid on Christmas now, just knowing all of these things are maybe around the corner.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
This has been Kingston Live. We encourage you to rate us on your listening platform of choice and subscribe where possible. Kingston Live was produced in Kingston at Titan Sound. Hosted by Riley Jabor and Eilish Sullivan. Writing and research by Peter Sanfilippo. Voiceover and technical production by John Sanfilippo. Promotional assistance by Jackson Coulter and Reed Cunningham. Executive producer Rob Howard. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@kingstonlive.ca.